from my language, and I imagine you as students could find similar kinds of examples in your language. Our word, the first word that I mentioned to you earlier was tmi, right? It's a word that describes a life force, the thing that we can't see, the thing that we can't really understand, but is, like if for instance, if you were to say, like, okay, let's dissect the brain and find your consciousness, find your mind, right? We could dissect it down to its smallest part, and we would never find our consciousness. We would never find our memories. We would never find our mind, right? So what is it, right? It depends on the brain, it depends on the chemicals, it depends on everything, but what is the mind, right? What is consciousness? Okay, so that idea of, to me, is how we see the earth, how we see nature, that there's a life force, there's a spirit that's there, that becomes alive when everything is working the way that it should. In other words, when all the animals and birds and plants and the sun and the air and the water and everything is doing what it's supposed to do as a part of that whole living system, just like your body is a living system. Your whole body works together. You can't just have your brain working by itself. You can't just have your liver working by itself or your lungs working by itself. It all has to work together for you to be a conscious human being, for that consciousness which is bigger and totally different than your physical body to come about. So that's how we see, from the Okanagan perspective, how this world is really like. It's like us in that way. It's a living thing. It has all these physical parts, it has all these chemical parts, it has all these different dynamics that are going on, but there's something bigger than that, that's invisible, that we cannot see, and that is there as a life force. We call it spirit, and it is something so magnificent and something so unique, like our lives are, like our minds are. You think about this, every single one of you is unique. There will never be another person who is you, with your mind, your memories, your thinking, your talents. There will never, ever, in the history of all the billions of human beings that are ever going to be, there is never going to be a you. And that's an entire beautiful miracle, a miraculous concept to appreciate. That's a spiritual thought from our indigenous philosophy. To know that somehow we got here and we have a mind. So it tells us that we need to be responsible to that. You could call it the great mystery or whatever. It's not a matter of belief. We know that we're here. We know that we're alive. We know that this mystery is going on, and that we're even a piece of that mystery in that way. We're a piece of that life force. And that's an incredible, incredible thought, an incredible idea. That's an indigenous idea of how the world works, how nature and everything like that. And we, as one part of it, is related to everything. We're connected to everything. So that word, to me, in my language, it probably has the same kind of idea in your language, in languages all over the world of indigenous peoples, because they've come to understand that it is more than just our physical bodies. There's something bigger going on here, and it's an important thing, and that it is a mystery, and we're not worried about that. What we're worried about is how we conduct ourselves within that. how we respond to that history is an important thing. So knowledge and science are the same thing, except that there's different ways of thinking about it. So I think about our science. This is at an Alkin Center again, and we have a group of people here. These are traditional ecological knowledge, the elders. You can see a few elders sitting around there, and as well as the Okanagan seal biologists. This was in 2004, and Alkin Center's been there since 1979. And like I said, I was one of the founders of this institute. And what it does is bring together elders like Harley Crowchild here, and in their language, ask them in our language to look at some of these ideas and to help us to understand how we should think about things like genetic traits of the sockeye salmon and the Okanagan River system. One of the reasons we asked that question, these are young biologists, young Okanagan biologists. We have had our salmon taken away from us. Since 1952, there was a dam, or a series of dams that were put in place on the Columbia River. And so our salmon were almost extinct in that river, in the Okanagan River. And one of our chiefs, Chief Salmon, said, let's put them back. Because not only is the salmon the spirit of the river, but they are one of our closest relatives in terms of how they have fed us and cared for us and have been our parents and our grandparents for thousands of years. They have looked after our survival. They have given their bodies to us so that we would have the ability to do the things that we do as human beings. And they work hard for us. Every year they travel thousands and thousands of miles to go out to the ocean like this small. They go all the way out to the ocean after they're hatched. And they live in the ocean for 4 years. And when they come back, they're this big and this wide. And they're carrying all the nutrients and all the vitamins and all of the things that we need. They're carrying it back for us. And you think about this. They struggle every single inch of the way because the river is going this way and they're going upstream. Every single inch of the way to bring that food from the ocean back to us. And they do it every 4 years. Every 4 years they come back and they give us that gift. And we understand that cycle. We have ceremonies to talk to them, to thank them, to respect them, to respect their journey. We just had the salmon ceremonies yesterday. I was lucky enough to be there. The little children from all the schools go there to the river and they bring those little salmon, this small ones that they raise because they're trying to put more on restoring them. The elders go and gather with the biologists the eggs that are put in the river and they raise them. They give them to the children in the schools, in our Indian schools and in the school districts where there's Aboriginal people. They raise them from eggs, they hatch. Right in those aquariums they hatch. And then, like yesterday, there was 500 children there by hand releasing those salmon so we could restore the spirit of the river. So we could have that gift that the Creator decided was good for us. To give us this relative that could feed us that way. And so that responsibility can't be done just by saying, well, let's put them back. That kind of responsibility takes young biologists, Indian people who understand why we're doing it and what not to do. how to do it under the care and the guidance of our spiritual leaders, our elders, and our knowledge keepers, so that we don't make mistakes, so we don't do it wrong, so we respect them in the right way. So when they come back, we also, because we're our children, we're included in, they're our future, included in releasing them. They're also taught that when they're elders, they have to remember them. Remember that gift, remember to talk to them, remember to thank them, remember to have the ceremonies. So that's really an important way. It's not just the observation, but what is that connection of those things out there to us as people? As indigenous people, we know what those connections are in our land and in our territory. We know what is important. We know what we have to do in order to be respectful.